Unachungia wapi mifugo yako?
hifadhi ya Serengeti.
I graze cattle at the Serengeti National Park. I faced the challenge of being arrested several times by wildlife rangers. I was arrested and had to pay a fine of 3.4 million Tanzania shillings.
La ng'ombe kuchungia katika hifadhi nimekuwa ni changamoto sana katika maeneo haya.
Grazing in game reserve has been a challenge in Tanzania. It affects wildlife ecology and causes transmission of disease. Let us cooperate together on providing education to keep cattle keepers and pastoralist community on the effect of grazing in the game reserve at national parks.
Kwa jina naitwa Anderson Njiginya Kabuko, mkurugenzi mtendaji wa halmashauri ya wilaya Busega.
We found good methods to involve youth in sports. It helps them in the reduction of HIV/AIDS transmission, as sometimes the youth will be very busy with sports and not get involved in wildlife poaching or other dangerous activities. Our district is very close to the game reserve and national parks. If our youth can become busy with sports, automatically youth will not get involved with wildlife poaching. This is especially true of elephants, which are threatened by poachers in the game reserves and national parks. I was involved in wildlife poaching for 17 years. I did not see any benefit rather than killing wildlife. I was hunting wildlife for the meat, which is bush meat. I only killed animals like wildebeest, zebra, antelope, hippopotamus, and buffalo. I never actually hunted any elephants. Big challenge I encountered was being arrested by wildlife rangers. I was arrested and jailed for 4 years in a prison in Mugumo because I was involved with wildlife poaching. During the establishment of a project of the lodge, there was a lot of wildlife around the game reserve. Now from interaction of social activities, trees and wildlife are in decline in the area. We also face issues due to climate change. The tourist business is not bad in the area. It's about 50-50. We have 2 seasons, the low season and higher season. During the higher season, we get more tourists. Wildlife poaching, especially elephants, has been associated with the decline of tourism in Tanzania. Tourists visiting Tanzania typically come to see the big 5 animals.
Hii sehemu ya zizi.
This is partly rooted in the game reserve whereby tame livestock are stored. The part was supposed to be only wildlife, but livestock are rotated in this area. The issue of grazing in the national parks and game reserves in Tanzania is a major challenge. We need support from all stakeholders of wildlife to cooperate and jointly raise their voices against grazing in game reserve and national park. They also need to provide education to pastoralists on the importance of protecting wildlife and having few livestock, which can have a place for grazing, or they can even do zero grazing. We see wildlife and livestock mixing together. This can cause anthrax infection diseases from wildlife to livestock. As a result, when a person eats the meat affected by anthrax infection, they often can suffer and die. Once the livestock interaction or mix of wildlife and getting anthrax, we have to consult a veterinarian doctor to provide treatment to the cattle. The wildlife law indicates that it's not right to graze in the game reserve or national park. The area is reserved for wildlife grazing and not livestock. We need extra effort to educate the pastoralists to have a few cattle, which can get an area for grazing, or we can even introduce zero grazing, rather than having more cattle while there is inadequate pastures for grazing. There's a problem with pastoralist grazing in the game reserve and national park. However, the pastoralist community was requesting some part near the game reserve to be used for cattle grazing, and Deputy Minister of Tourism and National Resource informed them that is impossible. We returned cattle from drinking water, but they escaped and ran to the game reserve. We advise others not to graze in the game reserve and the national park because it has an effect on the wildlife. Another current conflict involves workers, especially the rangers from the game reserve and the pastoralists. There is no cooperation and social interaction between workers from protected area and rangers. Once they capture a pastoralist grazing in the game reserve, they do not provide education. Instead, they beat and provide a fine to them. Wild animals are problems for the farmers as well. They use a lot of money to prepare their farm and plant crops. Then the elephants migrate into the farm and destroy all crops in the farm. There is a compensation, but it's very small money and it takes too long to get that money. I faced the challenge of being arrested several times by wildlife rangers. I was arrested and had to pay a fine of 3.4 million Tanzania shillings. I was grazing at Serengeti National Park. I don't know what to do now. Farmers are complaining to us that we destroy their crops. The government prohibited us from grazing in the game reserve. Another farmer injected poison into a watermelon so that when an elephant eats it, the elephant will die in a short period of time.
Kijereshi kwa muda mrefu tumekuwa kwanza ni walipa kodi wazuri.
At Kijereshi camp, we are good taxpayers. We employed youth living close to our camp. We cooperate with the village authority on development issues like construction of primary and secondary schools, renovation of the village office, and we also provided a school desk.
Kwa majina naitwa Kitangita Wanda Mwikwabe, mwalimu mkuu wa shule ya msingi Lukungu.
Being close to the national park, we had the benefit of many things. Our school benefited from construction of a classroom for nursery school and primary.
Inang'aa kama nyota mbingu, ni nyeupe kama maziwa. Shule Lukungu imeumbwa na Mola.
Maoni yangu ni waombe.
Task of environmental conservation and fighting against wildlife poaching is not only a government responsibility. All stakeholders should participate in it. We need more NGOs in our district to come and work with us, providing conservation education in the community to wildlife poaching and wildlife trafficking. We need people to surrender that are involved in wildlife poaching. Currently, courageous people shun from poaching from their heart and not fear the police or rangers. In the future, our young children will not see elephants, but will read about them in a book of history that said Tanzania once had elephants.
Kutoa elimu ya ufugaji wa kibiashara.
In my opinion, pastoralists should be given business education related with livestock to have a few cattle with business vision to contribute to national income tax. We have managed to involve youth in wildlife conservation through sports. Peace for Conservation organized football tournament with aims of wildlife conservation through sport. Youth get education related with wildlife conservation, especially elephants, which are threatened by poachers in our community. Myself, I advise people to surrender if they are involved in wildlife poaching. Our government is very strict. The government should get enough knowledge about wildlife poaching, especially elephants. I promise I will be a good ambassador for elephant conservation by providing conservation education to people to stop involving himself in wildlife poaching.
Hii ni zizi ambao liko katika pori la akiba.
Grazing in the game reserves has an effect on wildlife ecology. It causes a disease interaction from wildlife to livestock. Grazing in the national park and game reserve is still a challenge in Tanzania. Conservation education should be provided to a community of pastoralists.
Nchi yetu Tanzania inaongoza kwa idadi ya tembo. Twajivunia kwani hili ni kubwa jambo. Tuwajibike kuzilinda mali asili zetu, kwani hakika zinainua uchumi wetu. Kutega sikio, sasa kuna tishio, kushamiri biashara haramu ya meno ya tembo. Unachochea ujangili, tembo wengi wanauawa. Majangili ni hatari, wanaleta tishio. Pambana na ujangili, liwe letu kusudio. Kwa pamoja sote tunaweza ujangili kutokomeza. Tishio hili ni dhahiri, hatupaswi kusubiri. Tuelekeze nguvu zetu kupambana na ujangili. Ujangili.